Hey, this is Chris, and welcome to the 300th episode of Popcorn Finance. And for this episode, I wanted to do something special. I wanted to do an AMA, an Ask Me Anything episode, where I just go through some questions that you all had for me, and specifically non-finance questions that you all sent in. And, to kick things off, I want to start with a question that no one asked, and that is, Chris, how many times have you recorded this video? Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you asking me that. This is my third time recording this video. The first time I recorded it was alongside the podcast, and for some reason I didn't realize that the camera I was using had a 30-minute timer, a time limit on it, and it just cut off. I didn't even know. I recorded that whole episode thinking I had video, and I didn't. So after I recovered from the absolute devastation that is recording video and not actually saving it, I said, you know what, dust yourself off. I got a new shirt. I said, I'm just gonna reset this whole thing. Let's record it again. So I sat down, recorded the whole thing again, and it came out all choppy. I don't know what happened. I've had that happen time to time with another camera I have, and it was just like stuttery. I was like, I can't use this. I was gonna give up. I said, you know what? I have part 2. I wanna put that out, and it's not gonna make sense without part 1. And you know what? I'm committed to doing this YouTube thing, so I'm gonna do it. So here I am. Third time is a charm, hopefully. I brought my Star Wars shirt here for good luck. You'll learn a little bit more about me and my Star Wars fandom in part 2 of the AMA episode, which will come out probably either tomorrow or this weekend is when I'll put out part 2. But anyways, thanks for joining me here, sticking with me as I work through all this nonsense that is trying to really get comfortable with this new video set I've been working on. I have camera number 2 over here, which is just my iPhone. It's as a backup. So just in case, I really hope nothing happens, but just in case something happens to this video, I got this video over here, which will be a very weird angle because I'm not going to be looking this way. But anyways, all right. Let's jump into the very first question I received. This one came in from Carolina_pineapple. And also this Latina Travel sent in a very similar question, both of them on Instagram. And so they wanted to know, why did I start the podcast and like the history of the show and how I came up with the name? Okay, so Popcorn Finance, if you dig back through the archives, the first episode you'll see it started around end of June of 2017. So it's been almost 5 years that I've been running the podcast. And I started it because I had always wanted to teach personal finance. I went to school for personal finance, and my career path just took a complete different direction than I thought I was going to. So long story short, I went into college as an art major, really loved Pixar's work, thought I was going to work for Pixar. That was my dream. But when I got there, I realized I wasn't really as passionate as the other people there. And they didn't just let me hop on a computer and start making Pixar movies. I had to learn all these other disciplines first, which makes sense. But I didn't know that as an 18-year-old going into college. And then by chance, I just was taking a personal finance class. It was just like a generic finance class that fit into those general elective classes you need to fill out your schedule. And I only wanted to go to class at a certain time, certain day, and it just filled that slot. So I picked it. And I really ended up enjoying it. Like I loved the topics we were discussing. It was like all this stuff I never knew about. I never knew any of these concepts. So I was like, you know what? I think since I don't really want to go the art route, let me go the finance route. And it was just by chance that the school I chose, because not for finance at all, but had a really good business program. And they had a financial planning track, like emphasis underneath the finance degree. So that's the route I went. I went that way, graduated, middle of the recession, couldn't find work. My mom's an accountant. She's like, why don't you do accounting work? And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And for a year, I was just looking for work. I couldn't find anything. I was still working at a bank. And I eventually gave in, switched over to accounting work, did bookkeeping, ran payroll departments. And, over time, I was like, I still want to teach this stuff, but how can I do it since my career has gone completely different or in a completely different path than I thought it would? And so I live in Southern California. I drive all the time. I listen to a ton of podcasts. And a friend of mine, Logan, the inspiration for this AMA episode, he had a podcast and ended up helping him run that podcast. And so I was like, why not do a podcast? So I sat down. I knew I wanted it to be a short form podcast because at the time there weren't a lot of short podcasts. A lot of them were in that 30-minute to an hour long range. Now there's a ton of them, but at the time there weren't that many. So I said, I want something short. That's what I would want to listen to. So let me make something like that. And I was trying to figure out what's the thing, what's the concept around this short form show. And so I was literally at work, just sitting around brainstorming, thinking of ideas. And then it hit me. I was like, well, what about like popcorn? Popcorn is really quick to make and you put it in the microwave, and the microwave is basically just a big timer that gets hot. So I was like, oh, popcorn. Okay, I can do this show will take about the time it takes to make popcorn because that's a really short period of time. And obviously I wanted to be finance focused. So just over time, I kind of put it together and I was like, oh, popcorn finance. That's what I'll call it. And that's kind of where the name of the show came from. So then from there, I I had the idea, I got the Twitter handle, and then I just did nothing. I made no content and I just sat on it for like around 3 years. And it was just because I was too scared to get started. I was nervous that I was going to be bad at it. No one was going to listen to it. It was going to be horrible. I was going to fail. So I said, you know what? How I can solve this? I'm just not going to do anything. And so that's what I did. I sat around and I'm really into tech, like tech. I listen to tech podcasts. Those were my first podcast I ever got into. And I go on a lot of tech blogs. And one day I think it was on The Verge. And this would have been about 3 years after I came up with the idea. And I saw that there was this app called Anchor where you could just, record it from your phone. And at the time, completely different than what it is now. It was basically like Instagram stories, but for audio. You would record something and it would just disappear 24 hours later. And that's why the first month of me creating the show, none of that stuff is really there because I was just kind of putting together, stitching together these pieces of audio. It would go up and disappear. And then about a month after that, they did an update to where you could actually create an RSS feed and publish it and make it a podcast that anyone can listen to. And so that's what I did. And so that's those first episodes you hear were me literally in my car, holding my phone up to my face, just recording the podcast. And I did that for probably the first 20 episodes. The first 20 episodes were all me in my car, whether on my lunch break at work or parked outside of my apartment, so I can get better acoustics. And that's just what it was. That's how I made the show. I had a notebook I carried with me and I would write down my ideas and kind of plan it out. And eventually, my same friend Logan let me borrow one of his microphones that he had from the old days of us making the other show. I moved into indoors to start recording the podcast. Then eventually, as the show gained momentum, I bought a different microphone. I kind of changed up setups a little bit, and that's kind of how the show got started. So thank you for that really great question. All right, this next one comes in from Michelle, and she wants to know, how does your family feel about your jobs? So I'm assuming like maybe like the podcast side of things, because for the majority of the time I've been running this podcast, I've been working a full-time day job and also doing the podcast in the evenings and on weekends whenever I had time. So for them in the beginning, they don't even know what a podcast is. So they didn't really have too many thoughts about it. But over time, as it started to gain traction, they started to kind of pay a little more attention to what I was doing. And they've always been really supportive of whatever I wanted to do, except when I wanted to be an art major. They're like, don't you want to eat? Don't you want to have money? And so that was the one time they were like, maybe you want to rethink this. But overall, they've been very, very supportive of the work I wanted to do. And so I'd say they've been very supportive. My dad tells his friends about it. My mom tells family about it. And, even though they don't really listen to podcasts, they're still, very supportive of what I do. I'd say the only time they got a little nervous was when I officially decided to step away. And I don't think I've really talked about that much on the podcast at this point, but starting really this month, I've officially begun the process of stepping away from my day job. So I'm just working part-time right now as I kind of help the new person come on board. And then after that, I'm going to be doing all of this type of stuff full-time, the podcasting, making videos, everything around financial literacy is what I'll do now. So, and I feel very fortunate to have the opportunity to do this. But my family was a little nervous when I told them about it. They were just like, hey, again, don't you want to eat? Don't you want insurance? And I was like, I'll be fine. I'll be able to cover that. But after they got over the initial shock of me saying I was stepping away from my job, they've still been extremely supportive all throughout the process. All right, so let's jump into this one here from James. So James, I know James. He sent these two to me personally. First question is, how much cash do you typically carry? And my first thought when I heard this was, why do you want to know that, James? Are you trying to kind of roll up on me one night as I'm coming home? I don't know. But just so you know, I don't have any cash. I haven't had cash in a while. I've been cashless for as long as I can remember. It's very surprising if I find any money in my wallet. I'm like, why do I have this? It probably maybe like a birthday, maybe be the only time I would get cash. And if it's like a younger person, like a younger family member, I can just send that to them electronically. So no, I never have any cash with me. And the other question, which is a good one, I was waiting for one of these. What is your favorite flavor of popcorn? And I have to say it's kettle corn. Kettle corn by far is the best flavor of popcorn. It's sweet, it's salty. You can eat it anytime. Butter, like movie theater butter popcorn is a close second. It's a very close second. You can't go wrong with that. But kettle corn is usually the way I'm going to go if I have the option. So this next question, this one comes in from Claudia, and this was a voice message. And as I told you, voice messages get priority. So here's what Claudia had to ask me.
Hi, Chris. This is Claudia. Congratulations on your 200th episode. My question is, what would your perfect day consist of?
So my perfect day, this is a good question. So for me, really, the perfect day is just where I get to just relax. I have no responsibilities. Like for me, I don't want to have to cook. I don't want to have to clean. I don't want to have to run errands, do anything. So the perfect day is where I can just take it easy. I can be at home, relax, have food, hot food delivered to me to where I can eat great meals that I did not have to prepare and just have no responsibilities. There's no email. No one's texting me, asking me anything. It's just a day of relaxation. And to me, those are the best days. I don't need to go anywhere. I don't need to do anything. I just like the peace and calmness of just relaxation. Next on the list, I thought this question came from a bot because the username was P96091317. So I was going to delete it until I've read the question. I was like, oh, this is a real person. And so they asked me, tell us about an interaction with a celebrity or someone you look up to. And I had to dig back and think because I'm like, I don't really ever remember interacting with the celebrity. I live in Southern California, but there's not like celebrities just like walking around. But then I thought back to when I was younger and two stories came to mind. One is kind of like, I didn't really get to meet the celebrity, but it's centered around them. And the other one is just embarrassing. So this first one, I don't know if you know who Kevin Garnett is. He's a basketball player for the Minnesota Timberwolves. He used to be, he's retired now. And at the time, it was around, I think, the early 2000s. They had just built the Staples Center a few years ago out in Los Angeles. So me and a group of friends, we all hopped in the car and we drove down there. And we didn't have tickets to the game, obviously, but they had all this stuff going around, going on around the arena for All-Star Weekend. And so we're like, maybe we'll just go check out and see what's going on. When you're young, you got nothing else to do. You got no money, but you got nothing to do. So we went up to this one place, and one of my friends, his name is Albert. He's all into shoes. And I think that's probably why we went to this Adidas pop-up store. And they would scan you, go through a metal detector and wave that wand on you to make sure you have any weapons before they let you in. And so we all had to line up, and he was at the front of the line. So he goes in first. Then we all are getting scanned in one by one. And I think I must have been towards the back of the line. So there was like a gap between each of us because it's not like we went through, I don't know why we didn't just, the first person wait and then we all kind of go in as a group. Albert just rushed in. And so as I'm getting like wanded down, making sure I'm not doing anything crazy, I hear him scream. He's like, it's Kevin Garnett, it's Kevin Garnett. And we're like, what? So we all rush in. And the way it was set up, it was like this hallway they built out of black curtains. And it kind of had a curve to it. So as you went in, you turned and the people behind you couldn't see you if they were far enough behind. So we're rushing in to try to catch up with him. And so we get there and we see him, he's just standing in front of a curtain. And we're like, what are you talking about? Kevin Garnett's not here. He's like, oh, no, he was here. I saw him as I was coming around the corner. The curtain was open and I saw Kevin Garnett. So I yelled, hey, it's Kevin Garnett, I guess to let us know. But the moment he started yelling, they obviously just shut the curtain on him and then he left. And so no one else got to see him. To this day, I'm not quite sure if Kevin Garnett was ever actually there. But if he was there, he made a very bad choice in yelling his name because we didn't get to see him. So that was that story. The other one, I'm only telling this story because I already told this on This Is Awkward, which is another podcast I run with my friend Allison. And I'm going to keep this vague because, to protect my identity and the identity, you already know who I am, but to keep it so vague that you don't know who it is I'm talking about because this was a horrible situation. But the high school I went to, there was a guy there who was a little bit older than me, maybe I guess like a few years older. And he ended up going to the NBA. He played on the basketball team in high school and he ended up going to the NBA. And so I remember that when he kind of got established, he started coming back and helping out the basketball team there. He would, give them jerseys and kind of be there around when they were training and, try to give back. So my brother was on the team at the time, my younger brother. And I remember my family would go to the games and, they would say they would hang out with, this guy's family, this basketball player's family. And so they were always talking about him and his family all the time. And I couldn't go to the games because I had to work. So I would just hear these stories, constantly hear these stories. And so one day, my wife and I think at the time we weren't married, we were just dating. We were at the local grocery store that's not too far from the high school. And we're walking up and down the aisles and we're walking through, I remember it very vividly, the frozen food aisle. And I see this basketball player there. And because I have heard my family talk about him and his family all the time, they're constantly talking about him, in my mind, it felt like I knew who he was. Like I knew him and he knew me for some weird reason. And I don't know if this ever happened to you before, but leave a comment if you've ever heard someone talked about so much that you start to almost feel like you know them. Because that's what happened to me. So when I walked by him, I was like, "Hey, what's going on? How you doing?" All enthusiastic. And he just looks at me. He's just staring at me like, "Who are you and why are you talking to me with so much enthusiasm?" And my wife was looking at me and she was like, "Why are you talking to this man with so much enthusiasm?" And then it hits me. It washes over me that I don't know him. He clearly doesn't know me. Why would he know who I am? And I'm just all talking to this guy like we're best friends. And it was so embarrassing that I have completely blacked out what happened after that. I don't really remember what happens. I'm just assuming there was some weird, awkward few words exchanged, and then I just kind of walked away, and he walked away. So yeah, these are I'm embarrassing myself again by telling this story, but it's already on the internet if you want to find it. So yeah, that was my interaction. So thank you, P960913117, for making me bring up these very painful memories. All right, next question here comes from Shane.Myers87. And he wrote in and asked, "How many hours per week do you devote to the podcast?" This is a great question. And I'm trying to get better at tracking my time and being good at knowing how much time I'm spending doing what. But I would say it really varies depending on the episode. So some episodes take longer than others. If it's an episode where I have a guest on, most of my time is prepping to ask that person questions, to structure the episode and get questions together that I want to ask. And I think you as a listeners would want to hear me ask this person. So I normally go through, outline a few questions. And, the good thing about the show is short. So the outlines are never super long. So, it could take me 30 minutes to an hour to kind of put together the structure and format I want for that interview. The thing that does take me the most time, and the thing that I've learned I need to prepare for the most, is the intro and ending of every episode. Because it's this kind of you don't want to put the person on the spot by saying, "Hey, introduce yourself." Hey, because I've done that before where it's like, "Hey, welcome to the show, Chris. Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself." And what I realized is that, especially after I've been a guest on other people's shows at this point, is that it's really hard being put on the spot to kind of introduce yourself, because it's not something that we're all, I guess, doing. You don't usually just introduce yourself to an audience like that. And so I've learned from listening to other shows. A big shout out to Stacking Benjamins, Joe Salci, the host there, one of the hosts. I've kind of learned a lot from him and how he formats his show. And I've talked to him about, how he builds his show out. And so one of the things I picked up was, let me introduce the person. I can do it quicker. I can do it more efficiently. And then also I don't put them on the spot, and I can let them comfortably get into the flow of the show. So that's what I do now. I write out the introduction, how I want to introduce you all to the topic of the week and also to the guest. And then I kind of script out how I want to close the show out, because that also can be a stumbling block if you don't really know how to wrap things up and get things to the end. So after I get all that together, I sit down with the guest. We normally talk for 30 minutes to an hour. It just depends on the topic and what else we have going on. From there, I now have help with an editor. Shout out to Steve. He's my editor on the podcast. And I send everything to him, and he starts cutting together a draft for me. And then normally we do about 2 revisions. He'll send it back to me. I'll listen to it. I say, "Oh, let's cut this piece out. Let's add this part in here. I didn't really like this part. Maybe the audio was messed up. Maybe you can hear the planes. I don't know if you can hear those, but maybe you hear a plane flying over my place." So I'd say between the prep, recording, editing, review, I'd say any episode could take, I'd say on the low end, maybe 2.5-ish hours, 2 to 3 hours in that ballpark. But if it's a little more involved, if I'm the only person, if it's a solo show, then obviously I'm doing more prep for research. I'm going through and creating a more detailed outline for myself to follow. So I make sure I get everything in I want to say in the episode. That can definitely add to the time. So I'd say anywhere from 2.5 hours on the low end to 5+ hours on the long side if it's a little more complex episode, if it's a little more research needed for me to get ready and be accurate when I say all this stuff to you all. So yeah, that's kind of what it looks like on the production side and how much time I end up spending on the podcast. Not to mention, I'm not even counting the time spent getting stuff ready for social media, working on these videos now. All those other things add definitely to what ends up making the full, I guess, podcast with all, encompassing media that goes along with it. So Shane, thanks for the great question. This last one, it's a voice message. They didn't leave their name, but I knew right away who this was. Her name is LaTanya, and I'm calling her out because we used to work together. And I knew if I got a question from her, it would be something like this.
Hey, Chris, when was the last time you had hair?
So I knew this is what she would be asking me, something like this. And so, Latanya, thank you so much for this amazing question. And, the last time I had hair, it's been a while, but I'd also like to point out there's hair on my face right now. So I'm counting that. There is hair on my face. So that is hair. But if you're talking specifically about the hair on my head, because I'm clearly, obviously bald, it's been a while. I would say around the age of 24 was when I started shaving my head. And I probably should have started shaving it years before. But as a guy, you're losing your hair. You're like, oh man, I gotta hold on to all these follicles. I can't let them go. I gotta squeeze them for dear life. But yeah, I probably should have shaved my head a lot earlier. My uncles, my mom's brothers are both bald. So I should have known it was coming for me. It was only going to be a matter of time before the baldness came for me. So yeah, I'd say it. So it's been about 10, 11 years of me shaving my head. And honestly, I love it now because it's a lot cheaper than getting haircuts all the time. And it's a lot easier to get ready every day. So Latanya, I'm so happy that I could end this video on your amazing question. Thank you so much for your very kind question you sent in. But no, just joking. It's all fine. She knows. We always joke back and forth, so it's fine. But thank you to all of you who sent in your questions and being a part of episode 300. I really hope you all get to see this video. I've not stopped recording yet, so I'm hoping that one of these cameras, this camera, that camera, one of them caught this video and I can put it up on YouTube. So if you're seeing this, thanks for sticking with me and watching this whole video. Take 3 of what is the first AMA Ask Me Anything episode. Part 2 will be coming out shortly, either in the next day or two. I'd say you'll see it pop up on YouTube. But if you have any other random questions you want to ask me, throw it in the comments below. Feel free to ask me anything random, and maybe I'll throw another random AMA episode up another point during the year, or maybe discuss it on the podcast. And speaking of the podcast, this is not just a YouTube video series here. I also run a podcast. It's called Popcorn Finance. You can just go to popcornfinance.com/listen to check it out, or just click the link down there in the description and you'll find the show there. So I hope you'll join me there. But more importantly, I appreciate you joining me for the 300th bag of popcorn. It's been a great journey, and I appreciate all of you coming along with me and supporting the work that I do. So hope you have an amazing rest of your week, and I'll see you soon with part 2 of this AMA.